So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshayahu the prophet, we find a layer of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. These are then the 61st chapter, and also chapter 1:8. And then studying these holy documents, then we find ourselves during the time of the restoration, where then the holy cities of the Messiah are then returning. The world is once again preparing for directives from the holy cities. These were very popular from during the time of Yohanan until 1009 or 6009, and then from then on was then the time of the seat. Let's just study then for a bit Revelation chapter then 13, where you find then an understanding related with a beast. But truly, when we study these documents, we have to understand the content and the context, because this chapter reveals a couple of beasts. However, the situation is, those are not truly beasts. Those are then deceits. How do we understand this situation? It's very simple. As we understand, the holy cities were then given directives for a time for 1,000 years. Then there was 1,000 years of deceit. This time of deceit was then subdivided by a couple of sections. One of them was then 800 years, and then the other 200 years. As we can understand, these are the times of deceit. So then these beasts truly are the facets of Nahashatan of deceit. So then, these then I had taken this doubt away, and then we find ourselves then studying the time of the end related then with trade and what's coming on in the future. As the holy cities are returning, then obviously the world is then preparing itself for the system coming shortly in the next 24 to 26 months, where then China then leads the world via the computer. This was predicted very plainly by Daniel the prophet, chapter 12, where he stated, and then at the end knowledge would increase, but he was speaking from a viewpoint of a tradesperson, and the only point you can ever understand from a tradesperson is obviously trade related with the high knowledge. Then we find ourselves studying then these documents and also understanding the importance of the Asian market and the Asian people uniting themselves, and this truly is taking place. So then, let's analyze the Gentile world for a moment, so then we can establish this understanding already given a long time ago. And then we're going to evaluate another area of then the statue of Daniel, where then iron does not mix with the clay. As we can understand, the Eurozone growth lacks momentum and is truly in a big trouble. But then this was predicted, because Daniel the prophet mentioned, and they would try to adhere to each other, but they would not. Their own system of monetary system plus what they wanted from God, what they did understand of God, obviously they were mixed up and didn't work. So then, let's try to evaluate then what's going on regarding the North Korea and South Korea and the great influence and the great work of the Soviet Union. As we can understand, the BRICS are then composed by 5 countries, and the nation of the Northern Kingdom, the Soviet Union, is uniting then both Koreas. Let's then understand the very important position of these nations. So then, in Seoul, Putin backs new trade area. He's trying then to unify South Korea and North Korea, and there is obviously a place in South Korea where then he found a very strong friendship, and the Soviets is going to start then shipbuilding in their country, and then the objective is uniting both Koreas. This obviously is going to work 100%, because as we read the holy documents regarding then Daniel, the 11th chapter, you find in the kingdom of the north later coming with much equipment, and whatsoever then the northern kingdom wants, they will get, as long as in line with the holy instructions, it will work. So then, as we study this situation, you find yourself then studying the breaks post, and then you find from the November 14th came out this article related then in Seoul the unification of the South Korea, and then the project has the interest of uniting then obviously both Koreas. Not only this, but then Japan has then twice as much as debt than GDP. Japan is in big trouble. They have a 10.8 or so debt, and then their income or then their GDP is 4.8. So they have twice as much as debt. These will give us only one answer, and one answer only. Japan must unite with China. Japan must unite with South Korea and North Korea. So then the entire Asian countries are then united as one. They have absolutely no choice but then listening very cautiously what Mr. Putin is working on, because he is absolutely right on target, and what he is working on will work 100%. So then we find ourselves furthering our understanding of this time when then the system is very close for downloading. Then we find in Revelation the Messiah himself explaining then the freighters of the earth. We can only understand the importance of the freighters' authority when we understand what Daniel has said regarding then the high knowledge computerized system of trade, where then each user of a computer has a chance of becoming then obviously wealthy, and then utilizing this system as then a means of help, so then places the freighters then in authority. So we are heading towards this situation. United States unfortunately is absolutely on the wrong path. Ever since 2010, United States is absolutely adrift as far as the system is concerned, because it's very important for us to establish then a link with the US, given its place to China, in substituting the USD with the Chinese yuan. Brazil has already purchased 30 times 12 digits of Chinese money, so then we are aware of there is a system coming. And then we find every Asian nation then joining themselves with the Chinese, and then later bit by bit, country after country after country, then linking up with the system. Coming very shortly, the next 24, 26 months, we should have very strong indications of the system. Then, studying Daniel, then the 11th chapter, verse number 4. That's precisely where we are at as far as the holy writings. We are in the 4th verse of the 11th chapter. Next year then is extremely important year, 21-4. Brazil is already bankrupt. Unfortunately, they had caught these scoundrels lately. They went to jail, and then they caught them very late. Brazil has no economy anymore whatsoever than the previous president worked on for a very long time, 8 years of very hard work. Those times are gone. Brazil is again in debt. The GDP of last year was 2.25. This year then must be yet calculated. And then the growth of 2012 was only 0.9%. This year the debt of Brazil is 2.45. So then we find ourselves then starting the new year on a negative already. And then we must have later on the industry start picking up, making deals with China next year on March, because the BRICS are coming to Brazil. It's going to be then in March next year in Fortaleza in the state of Ceará. So then we can establish plans of helping then the 5 countries as a unit. Brazil unfortunately is extremely antiquated and they have no interest in helping the system. The president unfortunately is incompetent. She does not understand what it means of becoming then a portion of a 5 nations. Brazil has a 70s mental state of protecting then the country. They make as if they are interested in speaking political wise, because unfortunately the people, because they do not have international news very often given, they are absolutely brainwashed by government and then media, and they use sports to cover it up. But then as chances are given, the nation can turn around, because there is lots of petroleum yet and coltan, extremely important for technology industry. But then we have to be very serious next year and then provide then the nations, the BRICS nations, and Brazil becoming then an actual member, a player, a very important player, so then the system can start. Because from then on is another few more months, another 20 months, then the system is becoming closer and closer and closer. However, the Brazilian government is absolutely incompetent. They are only working for themselves. Whatsoever then the previous government has done was already spent, and they spent on their own. And most of these people, they have then lifetime salaries, though a bit below what they used to make, yet they don't care. So then, studying these documents and what's going on then in the world, we find ourselves closer and closer and closer in expecting then the autumn feast to start the next few years. We have maximum of 10 plus 9 total. So then we find ourselves studying even further, because these articles are true. So then, United States then unfortunately is becoming more and more entangled in its own schemes. The healthcare plan is not working. We find ourselves then obviously making a reference of the despised one, because of the desire of having control over situations. They can't do it anymore. And then the lack of the computer system. US yet is very influential with the USD, but it is depreciating very fast. So they have to come up with the computer, so each nation, they have their modules set up, so then when the system is downloadable the next 24 to 26 months, then each nation can receive their dues, so then they can function. Because later when we study, then US again, once again, is going to become rich. If you understand the 28th verse of the 11th chapter, great wealth is yet awaiting US, but then they have to come up with a computerized system. The link with the great wealth of the 28th verse is directly related with the computer system. We must understand the money of China, the Chinese yuan, is going to become worldwide. Though mostly virtual, yet it's a form of money. Because the dragon must be obviously the first. Let's then understand why it should be the first. Because the facet of the dragon is yet coming. And not only this, but as we study further these holy documents, we find every step of the way is becoming closer and closer and closer and closer, the autumn feast. Then, as far as we can understand of the 4th chapter, next year, Mr. Xi and Mr. Kabila, respectively from China and Congo in Africa, they will make many deals. These deals are going to start then the new era of trade. The system does not show itself yet, but then it states, then the kingdom of the south shall be strong. Then later there are developments also of the Socialist Party of China related with trade. Does not mean control of other nations. It simply means a serious way of earnings, granting them obviously a very serious situation, because as nations are becoming more serious towards this trade, then they can develop themselves. It's quite obvious. Then later on you find then the flow. Then you find later then the Soviet Union crushing then the war in Congo. So then, what can we establish what the Messiah has said in the 24th chapter of Michiyahu in Daniel the 11th chapter? The only place of war in this planet should be only in Congo in Africa. It's the only place that should have war. The rest of the world should be working on reestablishing themselves and rebuilding themselves, because we are during the time of the restoration. So when the Messiah spoke in the 24th chapter of Michiyahu, what did he say? He said very precisely, you will hear of war only in Congo, and rumors of wars. Rumors. Rumors does not mean these, they do not mean war, but you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. However, this section of the Holy Instructions, they are not proper. What should be is, you then hear of war, only singular in Congo, in rumors of wars, people enticing wars, people having, for example, protests that can lead to war, but it's not war. But the only place in this planet should be only Congo, because the time of the restoration period is the 11th chapter of Daniel. You won't find any place else. The Messiah did not come to set up his own ideas. And this is what goes wrong with the regular instructions. The Greco and Roman translation is wrong, as if they made the Messiah with his own ideas, his own translation, his own going away from the holy instructions. No. The Messiah had to do what the prophets told him to do. While the prophets were then writing and recording those holy instructions, the Messiah was there with them. So then, only war. You then hear a war, or you will hear a war in rumors of wars. So then, as we understand and made this very clear, this means that the Middle East should be at peace. At least they should halt from war and start rebuilding. That's why China is there for. However, China is going through lots of changes. We understand the environment of China is very heavy. They have lots of contaminants in the air because they have lots of industry there yet. But China must act promptly. As we understand, for instance, Australia is a very profitable country, very serious country, and we, for example, in Brazil would wish that the spirit of organization of Australia would come to our country, because Australia has taken a very serious position. Their resolve is very strong. Those scoundrels that stole the money 31 times, 12 digits from the previous government, those were eliminated. And from next year there are very heavy penalties for those who are utilizing the money not wisely, plus another 25% penalty So we would wish that the spirit of Australia would come to Brazil and to help us get rid of these scoundrels of this government, so then we can contribute to the new system. But then going back to the situation with China, as we understand, contaminants in the air is very, very bad because people can barely breathe. As we understand, the realm of Australia, they have lots of coal, and the islands around them, they have lots of minerals, where then they can get a program going on amongst those islanders and bringing those results, those minerals, and then do the smeltering in Australia and then doing trade with China with products nearly ready for use. It would help then China tremendously. So then, there are plans of the new system. The point is the situation then regarding the nations understanding the holy instructions. They do not have the luxury anymore to do as they wish. The Creator has given 1,000 years of nonsense. Do we understand what nonsense means? During the 1,000 years of the seat, nations could do whatever they wanted, and obviously didn't work. Nations are absolutely in a scoundrel situation. Nations are then nearly bankrupt. A lot of them are bankrupt. The Eurozone is absolutely in shambles. The United States is broken. They are spending 5 times their own earnings, at least 5 times, a total insolvency. And then other countries are becoming bankrupt also. So then when the Creator gives the liberty to govern themselves without His restriction, is becoming simply a place where people can't live. Because without the holy cities, the world does not function. It was 1,000 years of deceit, 1,000 years of nonsense. At this time, there is a set schedule. Nations have no choice. But then, as they become harmonious with the holy instructions, then the whole world gains. Obviously. So then, next year, regarding the United States, the situation is becoming tighter and tighter and tighter against the United States. Next year, then in September, the first phase of Dragon Mart is going to be opened in Cancun, Mexico. This means the products that people are buying at the moment in the US, they're going to become up to 5 times cheaper in Cancun, Mexico next year in September. So then you can imagine the economy of US going even further down. These should give them at least a burst of strength for them to become more aware of the importance of the building of the new computer. Since the US holds mostly the USD at the moment, they can simply substitute their monetary system with the Chinese yen, and then each nation should report of how much they want from the system, and then making modules of each nation, and then obviously having those computers for sale. That individuals, rather than buying video games, junky, violent kinds of games, they should get these computers so they can prepare themselves for the new trade of the end. It's quite very obvious. Daniel the prophet spoke of it. The Messiah himself spoke of it. You find scores and scores of examples in Yeshayahu. So then why wait until the last minute? US should be working on the computer and then providing people with those computers so that they can do trade with China. Direct trade with China via computer. Investing and receiving via the same system. So then, this should give at least a very important point, then returning with the Soviet Union, because the unification of North and South Korea is extremely important, and it's showing then the capability of the Northern Kingdom as precisely as the Holy Instruction is stating. Because later you find then the status quo of the Soviet Union should be higher than the first. You find then in verse 1:4. then the latest state of then the northern kingdom should become higher than the first. But then when we reach this point, we must understand, then you find the Gentile Netzer, and this means the time of Mr. Castro and then Che Guevara, where then they started work in Congo. Because then later the Soviets must crush the war in Congo and put an end to the war in the world for a time. Where do we find this layer? Let's understand then the 24th chapter of Tiago. We can get this understanding very plain because the Messiah was very simple. He was very simple, but he was very stern, and he did not play games while he was talking, because he was aware of he couldn't have taken any understanding or any layer away from the holy instructions, neither could he include his own. So then, the Messiah speaks of the 24th chapter as he was coming out of the temple, and then the disciples drew near to him, and they were trying to become, what's the word? They were trying to put him in a very important position coming from themselves. As if the Messiah did not know they were scoundrels at the moment, because they thought they could use their own system then to put the Messiah in charge. The Messiah was already in charge, and he was not interested in the temple or doing what they wanted. So then, he speaks of then nations should rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and famines and plagues and earthquakes. But these are then the startings of then the pains. Then he speaks of the tribulations coming, but then the time is not yet. This is where we want very plainly. We find then in verse number 6, chapter number 24, for you are bound to hear of war. The Messiah is speaking of the time of the restoration period, 11th chapter of Daniel. You will hear, you are bound to hear of war and rumors of wars. Watch out, do not be disturbed, for it is required that these situations should take place, but it is not yet the end. The time is not yet. So then, when he speaks the time is not yet, he's explaining a period of time of a restoration where the world for a short time will experience peace. Because the Creator wants, obviously, the world to becoming aware of what's coming when this new place in the earth is going to be refurbished. There is a new earth that's going to be refurbished, and this existing age then must go away. So then, the time is not yet. The last war in this planet prior of the time of the peace is Congo. The rest of them should be obviously working towards rebuilding, because that's the whole reason. Time of rebuilding, the restoration period. And when you then read the understanding of Yeshayahu the prophet, chapter 1:8, even the Gentiles were included in the plan. So then, this layer of the 60th verse is linked directly with Daniel. And what's going on then? The Soviet Union is uniting those countries in trouble. At the moment, North and South will become friends with China. They have absolutely no choice. Not only this, but Japan is also going to become friends of China. They have no choice. Even during the Second World War, the Japanese people thought they were invincible. But it wasn't because of the time of the war. It's because of the unification of this time of the restoration period where then the Asian countries are united. So then, let's study further. Mr. Xi next year is closing a deal with Mr. Kabila. This deal was already posted on BRICS Post. We are only waiting for next year. The date is not set yet, but the most important companies of China will be in Congo in Africa closing deals. Thus then, the kingdom of the south shall be strong. Why then Congo? Because Yeshayahu the prophet said, chapter 1:8, and then woe to the kingdom of the south, woe to the place beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. That's Congo, because of the amount of riches this is in the country. So then, not only this, we find ourselves then studying later, then Egypt must be then linked up with China. This is extremely important. And then Syria linked up with China, linked up with Egypt. And then peace is then served in the entire Middle East, so then they get busy then rebuilding themselves. So then we are on track. Let's be sure of it, because we are at the moment in 11.4, and next year then we'll find in 11.5. As far as the United States, we will not have to repeat so many times, but they have to come up with the system of the computer. How they are going to have the Chinese system in the computer and making those transactions instantly, so each nation then has a module, so then when the people they do trade amongst the nations, those taxes can be deducted. And then obviously the freighters must be included in the computer. So then, next year, Dragon Mart is open in September. The economy of US after September of 21-4 is going to be in very bad shape. At the moment, the budget of US is covered until next year in the mid-month. Then they're going to start having their expenses or an unlimited taking money from the world until the 7th of February. From then on, the crisis will return. And there is no provision from the 7th of February until the end of the fiscal year, the end of September of 21-4. And then in very September, where then the fiscal year is at, then China opens then Dragon Mart in Cancun. So those people around the world that would go then to New York to get games and get products, they're going to Mexico because they can get cheaper. You can imagine the economy of US. Not only this, but then in October, a month later, then the second Panama Canal then opens. There's another problem that's coming. So then next year is extremely important. And then the BRICS are coming to Brazil, and we hope then this government can shape up and make a nice deal next year in March, because it's going to set the stage for the election in October of next year. So then we wait for the BRICS to come and to give us a help. Please stay tuned, much more coming up.